Good morning.
I'm about to wake up.
I am Michael Marr, the Senior Program Advisor for the Center for Energy Studies at the Baker Institute. Ken Medlock's children gave him a gift today, which was illness, so he's not here today, unfortunately. But I want to welcome you to this discussion on energy in Central Europe. We have with us the ambassador from the Czech Republic, Heinrich Kamanček, and he'll tell you how probably to pronounce it correctly when I'm through.
Oh, you got it right. Must have Czech ancestry.
Yeah. Ambassador Laszlo Szabó from Hungary, Ambassador Ivan Korczok from Slovak.
Morning.
And then the Deputy Chief of Mission for the Embassy of Poland, Paweł Kowalski.
Kotowski, yes, that's me.
This is, I think, a really interesting group. They were here in Houston really along the lines of the anniversary of the 30-year anniversary of the fall of the Soviet Union. There's lots of diplomatic and issues related to that, which they discussed yesterday at a different session. Today, we're going to focus a little bit more on energy in Central Europe. But a lot of that discussion of energy in Central Europe reflects history. Their ties to the Soviet Union, how their economies were structured while they were under the control of the Soviet Union. What that meant when they got free, how have they been trying to catch up with Western Europe on their economies. And they also have a somewhat different view maybe of reliance on Russian energy than Western Europe. And so all of this is going to be discussed today. And I think of it a little bit of like the United States. There's a lot of differences in political views as you move across the states in the United States. You have the same things in Europe. Depending on where you sit, you have a different view of energy, security, and other issues. And I think this will be a very interesting discussion because we tend to, in the United States, hear about Germany and France and Brexit. But what's going on in Eastern Europe is very important, especially for the security of Europe. And so I'd like to introduce Anna Mikulska, who is our non-resident fellow here at the Center for Energy Studies. She has done a lot of work looking at energy security issues in Europe, especially related to Russian gas and the ability to import LNG, and she will moderate our discussion.
Welcome, everyone. So we will start with individual presentations, a couple of words from our panelists, and then we move to a discussion of issues that are on hand and also related to generally energy security in Central and Eastern Europe and how it relates to European security, US-European relations, and so on. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, Michael, and thank you. Just wanted to express my appreciation for the Baker Institute to host us. This is, of course, the most prestigious and very reliable center of excellency, I would say, on energy discussions, on policy matters. So I'm very much and very happy to be here and participate in these timely discussions on energy, on Central Europe, on the challenges in our part of Europe. I think I'll start by saying that energy security and energy situation in Central Europe is part of all the major geopolitical considerations regarding our part of Europe. And this has become, for pundits, for analysts, for think tanks, for government, for governments, an important part of consideration about the current status quo and the future, and when we are going as individual countries, as a region, and which way we are heading, and what are the end game of all of this. For us, for Poland, energy security is a crucial and very important part of our regional policy, and as you know, we've been dependent on just one source of energy for many years from Russia, and this is a major. This has been a major, of course, source of concerns. Being dependent on one source of energy. So for several years now, we've been developing I would say, smart strategy to diversify and to look for other sources of energy and other routes of energy. So as you know, there's been very interesting developments in Poland and in Central Europe, and I just wanted to tackle some of them to give you the perspective and to give you the kind of understanding of the situation. As you know, Poland has developed several projects that some of them are completed, some are ongoing, and leading up to more diversity, more security, and maybe leading up to creating some what we call regional energy market in Central Europe. In 2015, we have completed first in Poland LNG terminal in Świnoujście. Very difficult name, but sorry for that. But what can I do about that? So Świnoujście has been our first LNG terminal, the capacity of which is 5 BCM currently. And we are now in the process of expanding this capacity to 7.5 BCM. In the next year or two, this project will be completed. We are also planning on installing another LNG terminal. This time, this is going to be a floating terminal in the near the city of Gdańsk. By October 2022, we will have completed a strategic project and really historical breakthrough in this part of Europe, which will be the Baltic Pipe, to bring gas from Norwegian shelf through Denmark to Poland. And the capacity of this major project will be around 10 BCM. To give you the perspective, we import currently more or less 9 BCM from Russia. So this project, the Baltic Pipe alone, will be a crucial turning point in our diversification efforts. Other than that, we are building interconnections among our countries, and Poland is now constructing a major interconnector with Slovakia, which will be completed probably in 1 or 2 years. And we are also building interconnector to Lithuania, but also to Ukraine, which will be crucially important from the point of view of us being able to assist Ukrainians in their probably very tense and difficult period when probably the transit of Russian gas expires at the end of this year, and this will be another, but this is a kind of separate topic for another probably fascinating discussion about Ukraine, about how we can collectively assist this country. So basically, these are the major gas project that Poland has been embarked on. But also, other than that, we are looking at introducing nuclear energy in Poland, and the government has given the initial green light towards developing this project in Poland. This is going to be long-term investment, but we are looking at nuclear energy as a stable and reliable source of energy, which will help us further diversify and provide the conditions conducive towards affordable prices for end consumers. In line with the EU policy, we are also thinking about, of course, climate policy and environmental aspects, issues. And we are in the very intense, now currently in Poland, debate about the renewables, about what is called energy transition, and fulfilling the criteria and requirements by the EU climate policy, which we are, of course, part of. And some of the discussions refer to wind projects, other renewables. For example, in the current energy strategy that the government is about to finalize in the next probably a few months, is to keep the current existing onshore wind projects, but also to develop offshore wind farms in the Baltic Sea. So in our terms, when we think about energy, this is a comprehensive kind of thinking, comprehensive overarching strategy, and there are several, I think, benchmarks or requirements that we or scopes or frameworks that we are kind of leading this discussion up to workable and beneficial solutions. And this is, of course, security of critical infrastructure, reliability, effectiveness, but also aspects and issues that limit the detrimental effect of energy policy on environment. As you know, Poland organized this climate conference in Katowice, COP24, which was instrumental towards adopting some package or rule book towards implementing the Paris Agreement. And this has been Poland's contribution into this global climate policy and global climate considerations that we are very much part of, and we want to be active. We want to look for critical and workable, doable solutions to those problems. Maybe I'll stop at that, and I'm very much looking forward to the questions later after that, and I'm very much fascinated by the discussions. This is my third stay in Houston, and I participate in those discussions at Baker Institute before, and I hope that this cooperation, then our participation in this discussion will continue. Thank you so much.
And the next one. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having us. For four of us representing Visegrad Group for Central European countries. And I'm glad that the most important anniversary in our modern history was mentioned right at the beginning. Thank you for that. It's 30 years since our countries regained freedom, and 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Before I get to energy, because I think we will have plenty of time discussing all the details, I want to make exactly this reference to what happened 30 years ago, because these days, when you read articles and analyses and attending conferences, which are basically taking a stock of what happened over the last 30 years, where we are today, and when we are trying to scrutinize whether our countries are living up to the legacy of 1989, you get a pretty mixed picture. Some are saying, well, it could have been better, or it should be better, because we see problems in development in Central Europe. And that's absolutely legitimate, let me say that. Yet at the same time, I think if you look at what our countries have achieved, we have entirely transformed our economy into liberal economies, where we have established democratic systems in our country, where we have, I hope, I can say so, overcome the legacy, heavy, difficult legacy of communists, 4 decades of communism, I think we can be proud of all these achievements. And I'm mentioning that also because very often people tend to forget that this 30 years was tremendously difficult period of transformation with huge costs. You have 2 generations at least who have a right to feel like abandoned or sacrificed generation because they have been living for 40 years in communism and then they have experienced the most difficult time of transformation. So I divide those 30 years that we have been going through into 2 parts. The first 15 were dedicated to transforming everything, as I have mentioned, with huge costs. And then the second 15 years, actually from the moment when we became members of NATO and European Union, it was 15 years, but definitely a whole decade of crisis. We've been in a constant crisis management since we became members of Western institutions, if you realize that, because it all started in 2008 when we have been experiencing the financial crisis when Eurozone almost fell apart. Then when we have stabilized the situation and economy in European Union, the Russians have invaded Ukraine and unthinkable happened. We really even have not contemplating that in 2014 something like what we've seen in Ukraine can happen. And then the most divisive crisis has hit Europe, and that was the migration crisis. So I will not be going into those details because the theme is energy, and I'll go to it immediately. But I'm just making this point to you, our American friends and audience, to look at our countries and developments as you see it right now through this perspective of what we've been going through over the last 30 years. Energy and Slovakia, what came to my mind when we had a fascinating debate with Ambassador Djerjan just a few minutes ago is that, in fact, our countries, we've been doing everything and successfully to integrate, to ensure and make sure that we guarantee both prosperity and security and defense for our countries. But for the first time, we really understood what it means if you are threatened by something but it has paralyzed country with in a security context. It was in 2009. So out of 30 years, for the first time when we once again understood that our security is threatened, it was via gas crisis. So it was in the moment in January in 2009, and remember that because I was ambassador to Germany back then, and overnight we've been trying to organize a reverse gas flow, which is a sort of revolution, because we managed under pressure to completely reverse the course and the flow of gas, which, that was like we've changed the paradigm, because for 40 years, it was always from the east to the west. But under that pressure, Russians, in fact, because they cut off the deliveries, they forced us to making really this change. So 2009, for the first time, not for the first time, but we realized how important actually energy security is. It was a wake-up call, because since 1989, 20 years passed since we came to that point. But then a decade of a very intensive effort followed, which basically has completely changed the map when it comes to infrastructure in Central Europe. I dare say situation like this cannot happen anymore. So it can happen that Ukraine will have a problem because they're directly tied to Russia, but there are other alternative routes how our countries, 4 countries and other countries of Central Europe can be delivered with gas, and that's also a huge achievement. My colleague has mentioned that it not only makes us less dependent for that, but it opens new opportunities, including for LNG, because Poland is heavily investing in that technology. We are investing in interconnectors, north-south, so it's not only the east-west route. but also north-south corridor. Since 2015, Laszlo, I think we are connected directly, which again is not only about Hungary and Slovakia, but it opens opportunities for gas being delivered from southern corridor, including from TANAP and other alternative resources. Number two, very quickly and bluntly, Nord Stream 2, a clear no from Slovakia. We don't think that this is a project which somehow fits into the whole logic of what European Union is trying to do, namely make us less dependent on Russia. On the contrary, it increases the dependence on it. Number three, what is part of Slovak energy policy is certainly the goals of our climate policy, and that's a huge challenge. I can tell you, I'd be happy to learn from you how you see it from the U.S. perspective, knowing where you are, what the U.S. administration is on it, which rather prefers an individual contribution than being tied within a multilateral agreement, specifically Paris Agreement. We in Slovakia, maybe compared to my friends here at the table, are more open to more ambitious goals of European Union under certain conditions. So one of the conditions is that that our countries must preserve the sovereign right to set their energy mix. In case of Slovakia, the energy mix is nuclear 22%, gas 24%, coal 19%, oil 20%, and renewables 17%. So we don't want that the European Union would prescribe to us how we should change this, and especially we will not agree with, let's say, attempt to eliminate the nuclear power. That's the third point, which is a backbone of Slovak energy policy, and it's all our ability to deliver on the ambitious climate goals. Without nuclear, we won't be able to deliver that. I'll stop here. I was too long, I apologize, but I wanted to make this first point about 30 years what we achieved and how glad we are that we can be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will try to be extremely short for the Czech Republic. So 3 points. The shortest one will be political, then the energy mix, then gas and oil. The political point, have you noticed that my Slovak brother says Slovakia is in the Center Europe, not using Eastern Europe? I think that applies for all of us. We do believe we are the Center Europe with a Western culture, because if you say Eastern, somehow you should be in the cold, corrupt, and solving troubles. None of us is doing that. As for Prague, we usually say that it's, if you are in Vienna, it's in the west. If you are in Paris, it's in the west. If you go from Vienna to Paris, you go to Prague. I don't know how you can end up in the east. Technically impossible. Okay, as for the Czech energy mix, approximately half of our energy we get from brown and black coal, around 33% is the nuclear, around 10% is gas, and the rest are renewables. The strategy is long time to decrease the coal consumption. On the other hand, we completely changed the technologies, so it's not so harmful as it used to be, but we do believe that our future is in the nuclear power, so almost the same trouble with some of the EU prescriptions as Slovakia would have, the Czech Republic would have as well. We have currently 2 nuclear power stations, and we expect basically double or triple capacity of the first one in the upcoming 20 years. And yes, we export electrical energy, especially to Germany and Austria, because both of them went so ecological that they buy our electrical energy. It was probably economically the happiest moment of the new Czech Republic, the German green policy. And as for the gas and oil, we got the security trouble connected with the pipelines in the beginning of the 90s. So we are a little bit in a different position, that we are not that much reliable on the Russians as you would expect us to be. As for the gas, last year we took close to 93% of our consumption basically through Rotterdam, based on the Rotterdam prices. So the result is that we do buy even the Russian gas, but we not buy it from Russians because it's cheaper to buy it from Rotterdam than from Russians. So we learned free market relatively quick. And it helps negotiating with Russians as well. As for the oil, the first thing we did in the beginning of the 90s, we built the oil pipeline to the west, basically as a leverage, discussing with Russians how much our prices will be. We were relatively surprised how it turned out. We never used this oil pipeline to deliver oil from the west, because every time we had too much of the oil from the east. So we ended up using this pipeline the opposite way than we thought, that we will bring the competition. Quite opposite, we were re-exporting Russian gas or Russian oil, because usually Russia, as a good third world country, has nothing else how to pay the bills. So we got usually more oil than we ever needed. By the way, it would be also the technological problem, because the Russian oil has completely different quality, and basically you need a different tuning of the refinery. So we have two pipelines to the Russian oil. Both refineries are tuned to the Russian type of oil, so you cannot immediately bring something else. And both of them are, of course, in the Polish hands, because we know that if you want to discuss with Russian, it's better to send Polish. They will be very tough on them, and as the result, they got the Russian price for the Russian gas in Poland, which we call Czech price plus the Polish punishment. So we do not have the same problems as the rest. I think I can stop here.
Oh, it's great to be here, and I know that all the people of the Republic of Texas are experts of energy, so it's good to be between experts. Just to put things into perspective, these four countries seem a little bit small from the US, so let me just explain you the dynamics of economics of Europe. The trade between the Visegrad four countries, Poland, Czech, Slovakia, and Hungary, and Germany is 75% higher than the trade between France and Germany, who are the two superpowers of Europe, economic superpowers. So I believe this gives you an understanding of the political, geopolitical, and economic importance of these four countries. So even though they seem insignificant, and we are usually the size of mid-sized or bigger state here in the United States, this population and the economic power represent is quite important, and it's very important from an energy security and national security perspective as well. Traditionally, unfortunately, all those pipelines in our part of the world are coming from east to west. Western Europe already has a very good network, and free market economy works there when it comes to energy. It doesn't work in our part. 3 of the 4 countries are landlocked, even though we would love to build an LNG terminal on our sea, but we don't have a sea, so it's, come on. We only have a landlocked sea called Lake Balaton, which is a nice recreational area, but there's no oil there. Whenever we drill a hole, it's usually water popping up, which is not bad, actually. This might be more expensive in a few years' time than oil or gas. When it comes to dynamics of the market, again, it's still Russian gas. Wherever we go, it's only Russian gas. Hungary has already done its homework. We have built pipelines to all our neighbors, so we can receive gas or send gas to our neighbors. Unfortunately, our neighbors have not been that successful. Obviously, our only neighbor from these 3 other countries is Slovakia, and with Slovakia and Hungary we have an excellent collaboration and a very good bidirectional pipeline. 2 of our major alternative sources for future diversification will be from Romania. once ExxonMobil decides whether to invest into Romania, then we would be able to get hold of the Neptune offshore gas field production. This will be American gas. And once we can get that, this could actually provide approximately 4.5 billion cubic meters of gas to us, which is approximately half of our annual needs. That would be a real breakthrough for us. The Croatian LNG terminal that has been promised to the European Union quite long ago, luckily the finances came together, and it seems that within 2 years it will be ready. This will create an additional opportunity for us. Approximately 10-15% of our annual requirement will be or have to be provided by this pipeline. The Slovakian-Polish interconnector is very important for us. By 2023, I believe it will be about 3.5 billion cubic meters. By a few years later, 2027, we will have approximately 7 billion cubic meters capacity on that pipeline. So that's also very important for us. And we are still waiting for Italy and Slovenia to complete their pipeline towards Hungary. Once this is done, we can get gas from the Adriatic Sea and from the Italian markets, but we can also send gas from Romania to Italy backwards. So if this is needed, that's why the bidirectional opportunities are very important. So even if we import gas from Slovakia, that's still Russian gas. The good news is that whenever the Russians close the tap to Ukraine, we can provide gas back to them. So it's Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary who provided gas back to Ukraine in these last 4 years. Hungary only delivered more than an annual consumption back to Ukraine. That was also Russian gas, unfortunately. But as they say in the oil and gas market, the molecules are not labeled of the place of origin. But my promise to my country before I came here was that I will deliver American LNG to Hungary. So I really want to make sure that this will happen. So I really count on you to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just logistically, do we have set up questions from the audience that could be written up, or are we gonna do the? We do. So we will distribute paper if anybody would have any questions while we discuss here. We will have a Q&A later, and we will have those questions here for our diplomats, for our ambassadors. So listening to all the presentations and talking about the different countries, I think one thing that I wanted to underscore is that Visegrad 4 group, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, and Hungary, they have been working together to develop a completely new system and have been extremely successful in developing this new economic and political system. They have collaborated since the end of the Soviet Union, and they have continued to collaborate, including, as we've heard, in the area of energy. So what I wanted to really start with is kind of going back to those years when the transition from the centrally planned economy was happening. And if you could share with us how did the transition happen? What were the major issues that the countries in Central and Eastern Europe, the Visegrad countries, have faced, and how this potentially has changed over those decades, 3 decades? That how those countries, how whether those goals, as we've heard, how are they differ now, and whether they can provide a platform for collaboration, and how? Sure.
Shall I start? Yes, I think this is a very complicated question that is not that easy to answer. But I think to try to understand this we need to go back to at least 1988, 1989, when in our case Poland was in a very deep and severe, I think the most severe and really disruptive and economic crisis. And as you probably don't remember 30 years back, but I remember those times in Poland when there was a widespread, very shortage of food, and black market basically was responsible for distributing goods and services even. So we were really at the dead end of our central planned economy in Poland. And this and other factors contributed to this major historic shifts in Poland economically and politically. And when we established the free market economy and the new rules of governing and economic governance in Poland, it really was difficult and very painful for people. And by 1993, like 3 million people were out of job. The inflation was still at the level of 35%. But those reforms that we introduced at the beginning of the 90s, in 1990 and 91, really started to work. And we, in a way, we were able to bottom out and produce a constant economic growth ever since. So in our experience, that was very kind of tragic and difficult economic crisis that led to economic and political changes in Poland, and later after that led to this huge economic success that we are now are enjoying. And for the last 27 years, we enjoyed a constant economic growth, which was not even disrupted by the world economic crisis of 2008 and 2009. In terms of, and we are now, expanding at a speed of light. I'm always using this comparison. Our economy is growing, one of the fastest growing economies in the European Union currently. And we are catching up with our Western kind of partners in terms of development, economic growth, GDP per capita, and all that major economic factors. In terms of energy, what we inherited was the outdated infrastructure. That was what was mentioned by my colleagues, this east-west axis that we now want to change. We now strive to break this dependence, and this is why the north-south axis is so much on our minds currently. But I would also be remiss if I did not mention the 3 Cs initiative. You probably know that this is a grouping of 12 Central European countries, including our countries, that are now thinking about catching up in terms of development, in terms of 3 major kind of areas: infrastructure, road and rail infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and digital. And in terms of energy, the 3 Cs now have established what is now called the 3 Cs Initiative Fund, Investment Fund, which will be also contributing to developing and supporting those energy projects in our part of Europe. So I would like to flag this to you as a promising and developing and currently being discussed initiatives in Central Europe, wider than Visegrad 4. Visegrad 4 is, of course, very crucially important in terms of reaching and achieving this energy independence and diversification, but it goes wider and goes from north to south, and again 12 Central European countries that are embarking on those projects to catch up in terms of because, as you know, the Central Europe is still lagging behind in terms of infrastructure behind Western Europe, and this deficit, I think, is estimated. There are different estimates, but probably in the range of some 5 or maybe 600 billion US dollars. So this is a kind of, there's a lot of work ahead of us. in this regard. But when we started this endeavor 30 years ago, we would not expect that we would achieve such a huge and overwhelming, overarching economic and political success as we are now enjoying in Central Europe.
I mean, my Polish colleague covered, I think, almost everything. We've made major steps towards increasing our energy security under pressure, as I have said, because when you compare where we were 30 years ago, 20 years ago, where we are now, we are much, much better off. The crisis as we have experienced in 2009, in fact, cannot happen because infrastructure is in place or soon will be in place. Another question is how to make progress in achieving or allowing for alternative sources through which gas can be delivered here, and that's certainly when it comes to shale gas, for example, which by the way, the imports from the United States to Europe have increased over the last 1 year, 1.5 years, by 270%. How that is possible, I really don't know, but those are the figures and statistics confirmed by European Union. So we are opening here. The question certainly is price, and there are many issues that impact on it. But I agree, as we have invested into building infrastructure, so we have to invest into, if you want, I put it very bluntly, into security premium that we could pay at this moment, but with a view, or to look at it as an investment into our security. When it comes to this group, because this was the question, we have, there are differences, there are different point of departures for all of us, given by landlocked country, a country like Poland with access to sea and so on, and so on. When it comes to coal, for example, Slovakia has decreased its coal-fired power generation over the last 5 years by more than 20%, and in 2027 we are phasing out entirely from coal in our energy mix. So we are making these steps forward, and the fact that there is no ideology behind that. We just, and even less it is driven by our ambitious climate goals, but much more about the ineffectiveness. So the calculation is that simply the coal-fired power generation is not effective enough in our case. And number 3, Visegrad 4 is in spite of all differences that we are having, this is a natural, I even dare say, political framework within which we are trying especially to cooperate when it comes to all the initiatives within the European Union. One example that I can give you, well, we had differences, but at the end, Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary prevailed in their position when you blocked in June now, 2019, the initiative of the European Union to set as a binding goal the achievement of carbon neutrality by 2050. Slovakia was more open to that, thanks to the structure of economy and so on, less dependent on coal and so on and so on. But you see, you managed, and now next month in December we come back to it. And again, here I think we will be united. The more ambitious goals the European Union will have, the more flanking measures, in fact, mitigating measures that our countries need for energy-intensive sectors of economy will be needed if we want to be part of very ambitious European Union's climate change policy. So remember, this group has differences given by structure of economy, geography, and everything. But politically, I think we are working very closely together.
Okay, so very briefly, for the sake of time, the Czech perspective, and not to repeat what was said, basically the energy was the holy grail of the foreign policy from the 90s. And every time they were 2 more aspects which were not mentioned because some of them do not have them. First of all, when and how and where will be the north-south connection? Because if you imagine the map, Czech Republic is somehow too much west. So the south, so it goes Poland, Slovakia, Hungary. It goes behind us in the east. So our question was every time, are we part of this group? Yes. Do we want to be part of this group? Definitely yes. We integrated into the Western distribution nets, at least for the gas, but at the same time we welcome, finally, this connection north to south, because it brings another player to the competition, which at the end opens for us the possibility to be connected to that north-south link, or at least to have it as a leverage to our prices, which we get from the Western distribution net, because you need leverage in the West as much as you need it in negotiating in Moscow. You are oil gas people, you know it very well. The second question there, which was all the time a little bit on our mind as well, was, okay, so if we go dramatic Western way and we stop buying the only thing Russia can sell, oil and gas, what will happen in Russia then? Do we want to have Grizzly so hungry that he will start marching again? No. So it's the classical Asian game of the balance, that you don't want to be dependent, but you must find the way how to let them live. And as for infrastructure and the transition from in the 80s till now, not to repeat everything what was said, so I will end this intervention just with the classical Czech joke, what the socialist economy was really about. We used to be saying that when the Soviet Egyptologists opened the pyramid in Egypt, they found Pharaoh alive after 7,000 years inside. So they asked him, how can you live inside a pyramid? And he said, oh, I live from the excrements of the sacred bird. Okay, and what sacred bird lives from? And he said, oh, he lives from my excrements. And the Soviets pondered the question and said, well, that's socialist economy. so that's exactly what we ended.
This was very deep, Hinek. Thank you very much. Maybe a short reflection of what Ivan said about the dynamics in the European Union. Hungary is actually one of the most advanced cities when it comes to meeting the climate criteria of the Kyoto and the Paris agreements. The Kyoto agreement actually asks the developed world to if you take 1990 as a base, you have to reduce your how do you say, glasshouse gas effect emission, the emissions by 40% compared to that. We are at 32% already out of the 40. So we are really advanced. What we don't want is the European Union to tell us how to put together our mix, basically. We have only one coal-operated power plant left, and we are closing it about the same time as you do. So we are on the right path, and the renewable energies are coming. Obviously, we don't want to overshoot this target. Hinek mentioned this. Whenever the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, Germany is actually flooding all the neighbors with extra energy, and the trouble is actually born on the neighborhood. For us, it's also very important to note that these four countries are the powerhouse now of the European Union. The largest growth of GDP growth is happening in these countries. Hungary delivered 5.2% growth just earlier this year in the last 2 quarters, and I believe we have a lot to be proud of. 10 years ago, we were on the bottom of the list. Now we are on the top of the list. So that's quite an achievement. Also, with very aggressive tax policies, we were able to amplify the investment in the country, the productivity of the country. Now the unemployment rate is 3.3%, coming down from 12% in 2010. And with family-friendly policies, we were able to change the dynamics of demographics as well. The number of marriages in the last 8 years grew by 44% in Hungary. The number of divorces went down by 20%, fertility rate grew by 27%, and we really love this, and abortion rate went down by 33%. So I think these are major, major achievements, and we're very happy to see this. And the dynamics of the European Union is now very strange. At the last leadership, President Juncker's leadership in the European Union politicized the European Union. The European Union, in our view, is an economic collaboration of like-minded countries who want free movement of goods, people, financial services, but they became a political powerhouse. And this is something we don't like. Obviously, Brussels wants to have more and more power, and we are fighting for the sovereignty of the individual countries. So whatever is in the base contract with the European Union, that's what we want to live for. And also there's a misconception in US media as well about this aid the European Union is giving to the less developed member countries. It's not aid, actually. It's not aid. That's the deal. So the European Union has been providing cohesion funds for those countries that opened up their industry and their market to the West. They make more money on those aids than we do. Okay, so every euro that comes in from Germany or France gives them back 2 euros in profit. Okay, so don't be mistaken. This is not aid, especially not humanitarian aid. This is basically to develop our markets so that we can have much better purchasing power to buy their products. Okay, so it's a win-win on both sides, because in the meantime infrastructure is developing, the skills of the labor force is increasing, and the unified market basically creates even a more competitive European Union. At least that's what we hope for.
So what I basically hear is this kind of idea of energy security becoming more independent of the historical connection to Russia, but also kind of exerting a specific influence within the European Union for the European Union to recognize the needs and the situation that the growing economies are in with respect to specific electricity mix or generally primary energy mix. And providing it with the impact to grow. How does the U.S. fit within that structure? I mean, we've heard about already U.S. LNG being mentioned. U.S. Energy diplomacy has been very strong in Eastern and Central Europe. What do the countries of Central and Eastern Europe expect, want, see as a platform for collaboration or impact that U.S. could have on that region and also as a partner?
The cooperation with the United States has been crucial to Poland regarding our energy goals and energy priorities. We've had very good cooperation with this current administration, especially with Secretary Perry, with the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C., and we've appreciated the policy of the United States regarding concerning supporting our priorities in terms of achieving more diversification and more independence. We have commercially established several kind of channels of cooperation with the U.S. Major energy companies in terms of long-term contracts. We've already signed agreements with Sempra Energy, Global Venture, Cheniere, and we've received already 9 cargoes, shipments of LNG from Sabine Pass, which is just nearby. So politically, we've appreciated the stance and approach of the U.S. administration, and this allowed us for this commercial cooperation so far. And I did not mention that explicitly at the very beginning, but all those projects, all this cooperation. Other than the United States, we also bring LNG shipments and cargoes from the state of Qatar, but also from Norway. So we've diversified the portfolio already, and only the portfolio of the long-term contracts with the United States will be able to deliver around 9 BCM per annum after 2022, in the and 2023. Why this year? Why this date is so important and is crucial for us? At the end of 2022, our long-term contract with the Russian Gazprom expires. And by that time, given all those projects, given all those contracts, will allow us for not extending the contract with Gazprom. And this will be the turning point when we are gonna be able to say that we are independent and we have full kind of range of options and choices in terms of our energy supplies. But in all of this, the cooperation with the United States is crucial. Other than this, which is crucially important, we've also appreciated the opposition of the United States administration towards Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 2 is to us, to our countries, but not only to our countries, but to our region, is a dangerous and challenging project, which is not economically driven, but it is politically driven to kind of cut off, to be able for Russia to cut off transit through Ukraine and exert more pressure, more control over Central Europe. We oppose this project, and we are appreciative of the US similar stance in this regard. But notwithstanding Nord Stream 2, we have this very diverse and rich kind of strategy how to achieve this independence and diversification in our part of Europe. And again, the cooperation with the United States has been crucial in this regard. Thank you.
Nord Stream 2, certainly, and we very appreciate the U.S. support in opposing it. Nevertheless, I checked the state of play today. 80% of the offshore section is completed, so Nord Stream 2 will happen. Definitely, but political support of the U.S. is very much appreciated. LNG. This is absolutely important when it comes to diversification of sources, and I'm certain if there is an economic interest, if somebody makes money on it, it should work. We believe in free markets, and it's just a question of time that this is something that helps Central Europe in delivering more energy security. And number three, while my colleague spoke, I was sort of in doubt or uncertain whether I should say this, but I will.
Okay.
We've signed this sort of agreement. It's streamlined and whatever. I'm fine with that. But you know, I am a convinced Atlanticist. I grew up believing in the West, which is composed of two parts: Europe and United States. And whether we like it or not, historically we are undergoing the most challenging phase in our relationship. What does it have to do with energy? I wish the U.S., while we of course respect your position to Paris and everything, what the administration has done, we have to respect that. At the same time, I wish when it comes to environment, the U.S. would somehow also think in terms of how to engage multilaterally in what we are doing. And I'm not advising right now to reconsider its position to Paris Climate Agreement, but I'm making this point for, from the political perspective in Europe or in Slovakia, but in Europe I think similarly. In Slovakia we have 93% of public support for doing something for the climate and for the future. It is very difficult to explain to the broad public in Europe that the United States it has pulled out from this multilateral arrangement. Never ever would I dare say that US is not doing anything. No. I know the data. So you are delivering on greenhouse emissions and everything. But still, I wish in this broader context of a need to preserve transatlantic community, if you want, I wish US would somehow re-engage a little bit multilaterally. How that can be delivered, I have no idea whatsoever, because the world and globally it is the Paris Climate Agreement, and European Union will want to deliver on its ambition goals next year, 2020, by which we are supposed to deliver our plans for 2050. But still, I mean, we need the power, we need the leadership, we need the participation of the United States in this global effort. So this is my provocative. I didn't want you to applaud this. It could be then even more provocative. But that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, so what do we expect from the United States? We expect United States to be friendly, allied power, which is thinking of themselves as a European power as well. Because we believe that...
No, I mean it. It's European power.
Because you became the part of the security structure of Europe, not only through NATO long time ago, and we believe that on both sides of the Atlantic, it's not the community of the dollar, but the community of values. So we take you basically as the other face of the same old-time civilization in Europe. Now, in the upcoming years, you will be challenged because, let's face it, money is already in Asia. As much as we are talking today about the transatlantic link, which we really need to keep, soon there will be academia intellectuals talking about the trans-Pacific link, which is needed to be built because, as Madeleine Albright usually says, she's Czech, so she has a very cynical sense of humor, as I have, and she usually says, Nick, you must understand that United States never lives in monogamy. Meaning that you every time look to both sides of both oceans. So we believe that even in the 21st century, where economy will be more and more going pendulum style back to Asia, and you will be more and more focused on the West Coast and the Asian markets, there is a civilization bond on the both sides of the Atlantic. So what do we want to achieve is that as much as we understand that the price of gas is not just about the price of gas, but it's about our freedom as well, that much we expect you to understand that the price of gas is not just price of gas, it's about the community of the values we need to keep, because otherwise we both got changed beyond recognition.
Very nicely said, Hinek, thank you. Obviously, we are being asked this question all the time. Are you prepared to pay a premium for your security, national security? And actually, this takes me back to ask the question, is the United States prepared to give a discount on security? This has to work both ways, and it has to be equally considered as a really major strategic component of the energy security in Central Eastern Europe. And since Ukraine is our neighbor, we believe that the sovereignty and the integrity and health of Ukraine is so important for everyone, not only for Poland, that is actually a next door neighbor with Russia, but for all of us, and for the United States as well. So I think this has to be considered. When it comes to energy again, what the US can do is to help our neighbors to build the infrastructure. Until you can email gas, we need pipelines. So practically, we hope that with the help of the US, Croatia, Romania, and some other neighboring countries, we'll be able to complete their infrastructure, and then we will get US energy. In the meantime, the US is our number 2 investor after Germany, so that's a big deal. Only in Hungary, which is the size of Indiana, about 1/4 of Texas, we have 1,700 US companies who invested more than $12 billion in FDI. So we are very happy of this relationship, and the return on investment in these countries is actually sometimes better than in the US. So I believe we have to nurture this relationship, and we have to build on this. And again, it's not only a financial transaction, but it's also a cultural and civilizational value system that we have to promote on both sides of the pond. Thank you very much.
So before we go to the questions, maybe one quick question to expand on the Asian issue, because I think that's what stands, especially with regards to energy now, is the Asia that's going to attract a lot of natural gas, including LNG. The fact that we've had actually a lot of LNG coming into Europe over the last year has been related to price parity with Asia. That's uncommon. So we will expect usually that Asia has a pricier gas, and that's why a lot of LNG is going to go there, including a large demand. This is where a lot of markets are going to be. How do you kind of think about Asia and working between the suppliers of natural gas, suppliers of energy, as a competitive market, or how to attract that investment also? Have you thought about it, including collaboration between the countries? Sure.
Okay. Difficult question for a special workshop. Because Asia, what do we mean by Asia? India? China? Indonesia?
All of them are growing.
Yeah.
So yes,
and each of them will be completely different.
Right.
So on the grand plan, what we see, I can just say one thing. From the Czech perspective, we see that the Asians know what you are doing. Mm-hmm. They do have a tremendous capacity to plan in advance and deliver, because they are not bound by our laws. That's basically what is their major advantage, which we want never to achieve, by the way. But from the purely capitalistic point of view, obviously, it's a big advantage.
Has there been concern about the closer relationship between China and Russia, as also with respect to energy?
Definitely, because, okay, the natural state of affairs is like that. If you are 1.3 billion Chinese with very scarce resources, and you are watching North Siberia with 8 million Russians, I can imagine what goes on the Chinese mind. I can also imagine what goes on the Russian mind, which should naturally help us to solve eternal Russian questions. Are we Russians, Europeans, or Asians, or both? So it's in their own interest to be closer to the West, because I would claim that we present less of a danger for Russia for the future. It's not the current state of the affairs. But again, in Asia, you cannot compare China with India. These are completely two different animals in completely two different zoos. So once we say Asia, we must say Asia what, and
right.
in what year.
That's right. So if we have.
So I'm going to read a couple questions from the audience. We've had a lot of discussion about gas. We've had some discussion about a couple countries that are working to reduce their use of coal over time. Slovakia. Hungary does not have a big reliance. Czech has quite a big reliance, but they talked about increasing nuclear. Poland, I know, has a very strong coal industry. It's very important to the country. But as you move forward and you're having to decarbonize, there was not a lot of discussion about where would renewables fit in. I heard a lot of nuclear, and so one of the questions is, for the countries that don't have a coastline, you look at a lot of Western Europe, it's Baltic Sea, offshore wind is becoming more and more important. That clearly doesn't provide you an option. Is how are your wind resources or your solar, are they not really that good, and so nuclear becomes more and more of a option? If you would just kind of discuss that. And all of you will probably have different perspectives, so I'll start with Hungary.
Well, thank you. Hungary has one nuclear plant, but that's very important for us. It provides approximately 40% of our total electric needs. Now new modules are being built, and for a limited period of time, both the old modules and the new modules will be operating. This will give us approximately 60% of our total electricity needs from this one plant. And then the old modules will be phased out and we go back to this 40-45% of the energy mix. Because we have limited land, and obviously we have no sea, we have our limitations. I believe the biggest challenge, and this funny mention of the challenge what Germany creates around its neighbors, really presses you the question, where is the technology to store energy? So I believe once we solve this issue, this will be the answer. So then everyone will jump on those renewables. So we have a plan, we are progressing, we are keeping our promises based on the Kyoto and Paris agreements, but we have to see the technology developing in a way that it will allow everyone to store energy better.
I'm going to jump in real quick because when you mention nuclear and you mention the ability to store, actually nuclear is really good to be able to run your nuclear plants at full capacity and store it to meet other peaking and needs. So storage does not necessarily mean renewables. It could work very well with your nuclear strategy. And that's some of the work we've done. Peter Hartley, who you met earlier, that's some of the work he's done showing that nuclear and storage, it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Tell this to the Germans, please.
The Czech Republic?
Identical. We have a growing sector of renewables, so the problem is the storage and the new technologies to make it really financially effective. Wind will never be big in the Czech Republic, water never will be big in the Czech Republic. There is a chance for the solar. We played it a little bit. We invested heavily into the new technologies, and we are still waiting for having them in the form which makes it financially really so viable that they compete with the others.
I'm reading here in my papers so that I'm precise. In 2005, we were at 6% of renewables on our consumption. Now we are 12.7, so within 14 years we doubled that, and our target objective is 14% in 2020. So that's our commitment within the European Union. When it comes to composition, the most important part of it is hydro energy, biomass. Is that correct in English? Biomass. Biomass, wind, not that much, certainly, and not on top of it, but in parallel, certainly nuclear energy. I've mentioned that. I think Slovakia, after France in Europe, has the highest share of nuclear energy, more than 50%. So it's for us absolutely key and central. And we are building new blocks as well. It should be also mentioned that it was a controversial issue after our accession to the European Union because we had to close down two blocks of previous Russian type of nuclear reactors, but we are building now another new one. And another point with solar, because we have more and more sunny days in Slovakia. No, we see it. Definitely, but it became very controversial when we started with solar energy and with the support scheme. Basically, it became very costly at the beginning. Immediately, the industry was complaining that the feed-in prices were basically transferred on them. So solar has become a very controversial issue for these reasons that I'm mentioning.
In our case, just to give you an example how much we are dependent on coal, 80% of our electricity comes from coal. So this is a serious dependence on coal. we want to reduce this dependency to the level of 55, 60 by 2030, hopefully. In the meantime, we are developing the renewables. Hopefully, by 2030, the share of renewables in our energy mix will amount to probably 23%. So this is an ambitious goal. Other than that, we again nuclear is very much on. We are very much is very much on our mind, and the first nuclear reactors should be built in Poland by 2033, hopefully. So this is, and in terms of renewables, as I said in the beginning, we will be developing offshore wind farms in the Baltic Sea, which will hopefully bring up the level of our renewables in the energy mix.
So just quickly from Poland's viewpoint, we've talked a lot about energy security. Not only do you use a lot of coal, but that is your own employment, your own coal, so it provides a lot of energy security, but also economics. I'd imagine that is a challenge as you try to reduce an economic sector that's important to your economy. Is that, yeah?
Yes, of course, this is an important part of our economy, a major source of jobs. But we will be modernizing the sector of our economy. We'll be phasing out some of the lignite-fired plants, and this is kind of major focus on our discussions with the European Union, with Brussels, how to achieve this energy transition without hurting our economy. And our narrative is always that this transition should be just, should take into consideration the conditions of our economy. And I think there is some sort of responsiveness from Brussels regarding this narrative, and this is how we approach the negotiations regarding the 2030 European EU goals regarding climate, regarding environment, and bringing down or reducing the costs of on environment of this energy policy.
So we've heard quite a bit about Russian gas, and there's two aspects to Russian gas. There's a price point, which I think we've done a good job kind of discussing. The other question, though, is kind of a security question. I mean, you've seen Russia cut off gas once before to Europe. We've seen the annexation of Crimea. We've seen incursions into the Ukraine. We've seen some interference, potentially, of Russians in elections trying to influence voting. We know that's been a case in the U.S. Some in Europe also. So when you look at Western Europe versus Eastern Europe, it seems to me that Central to Eastern Europe, that defense concern, that national security issue is a bigger concern than on the West. And then it also brings in the United States. What is NATO's role? What is it going to do to help protect? So if you could kind of just talk a little bit about how do you balance within the EU and with the US the security side of the Russian gas question?
Okay. Difference in the view of security in the West and the Central Europe is historically done. We are closer to Russia. We understand their language. We understand their thinking. And our role in NATO is to be culture translator, what they really mean by what they say. Which, let's say, is not exactly developed art of Portugal. We understand that they simply never had their historic experience with Russia. NATO, absolutely crucial role of NATO. That's why we joined NATO sooner than we joined European Union. Because it's not just about security. It's about us being on the map. So the point of the it's a different lenses put on the same glasses and watching the same object. So I never saw a study, for example, good for academia, about the security concept of NATO countries vis-a-vis their historic experience. But it's a classical discussion inside NATO, when we have our mechanisms talking to Russia, and every time you can see the same set of characters: overcautious Polish, laughing Czech, German who somehow understands Russian position more than we wanted, like Nord Stream. And then you have the south wing of the European Union looking at us like, isn't it too strange discussion? Because the Mediterranean point of view is different. So and you have it in every part of the portfolio, including gas. So if that serves as the answer, because we are almost at the end.
Anyone want to jump in on that?
I think the problem with reality is that in the 90s, the West, let's call it like this, but that's ridiculous, because West is us. We are part of the West, both politically and culturally. West, it's not a geographical notion at all. It's how we are running our societies. It's what type of governance.
Yeah, West is a type of civilization.
It's type of civilization culturally and politically, what kind of governance. So we are part of it. But if you want, then the Western part in geographical terms of Europe maybe has viewed Russia as they wanted it to be. And we viewed Russia as it is. And we saw it that the wake-up call started not 2014 with Ukraine. That was the peak of it. But it started in Georgia, 2008. Don't forget that. And we've seen that Russia, in fact, and I'm speaking on behalf of a country which has no, so to say, ideological obstacle in developing relationship with Russia. We are not hostile to Russia. On the contrary. We want to have a good relationship with them. But at the same time, the problem seems to be that Russia has not, in fact, digested the history, and especially what happened in 1990 and 91 with dissolution of the Soviet Union, and in fact keeps on approaching the countries in its vicinity as what they call the doctrine of close neighborhood. We've seen that. And when you asked about NATO, we had a fascinating discussion with Ambassador Jejam before. It's about principles, and there must be principles in foreign policy. So what else in 1990 should the US policy have been if not allowing countries like the four of us to become part of the West, because it was our free choice? Why has Berlin Wall fallen then if we have not been allowed to express freely where we want to belong to? So it's very simple as it is. But once again, we are not the ones who want to have, who wants to run on the barricades against Russia. No, that's not that. They're a member of the United Nations Security Council. You have regional conflicts with huge impact on European security, where you will not find a solution without Russia. But then there are facts, and facts are 2008 and 2014, and this is unacceptable.
So just one quick question that kind of in this, there has been a really dominant figure in European politics for the last 15 years, Chancellor Merkel. She is leaving office. Germany has had a very strong view of lots of political issues as well as economic and other issues. How do you view the economic union in the next 5 years as is it growing apart, coming together? What are some of the dynamics, just quickly?
If I can start, first of all, some of our countries are portrayed in the US press as anti-European. Let me clarify, it's not true, okay? So the biggest support for European Union principles is between these countries, actually. Approximately 60 to 80% of people on the street support the European Union principles, while if you ask people in Belgium, in France, I could continue. It's more like 30, 40, 50%. Okay, so there's a much stronger support for European Union here than in the Western European countries. When it comes to the unity and the way forward with the European Union, I believe the European Union should probably spend a little bit more time in rewarding and incentivizing countries to stay in and work on the enlargement rather than penalizing the ones who want to leave. So I think if we really want to make sure that the civilization gets stronger and the economic cohesion in the European Union becomes stronger, we should embrace those countries who want to join. So the Western Balkans, for example, this is a huge demand, I believe, security-wise, economic-wise, to approximate them to European Union, as well as Ukraine also, and the same applies to NATO as well. So we are all pro-NATO enlargement. We believe we have to take those countries more seriously who are meeting the criteria for getting closer or working together with NATO. This is a clear major global security question.
I'm going to jump to Poland, let them jump in here.
Yes, the Polish society, Polish people are very overwhelmingly supportive of our membership in the European Union. Regarding the future, of course, it's very difficult to answer these questions. But I think the problematic, of course, there's the question of Brexit and UK leaving the European Union. The European Union, I'm sure, will be weakened by Brexit and by UK's leaving the Union. But we hope that we'll be able to establish good cooperation with UK regarding what is called common security and defense policy between UK and the European Union. I think our countries would like to be increasingly represented in the European institutions and in European bureaucracy. And this will be, we see this as our contribution to the development of the European Union and to creating conditions conducive towards, being our voices heard in the European Union. So this is, we believe in the European Union. We want this European Union to reform in order to be more responsive and more inclusive. Western Balkans, it's important to continue and to enlarge the European Union to include our remaining Western Balkan countries that are not in the European Union. In terms of our relationship with Germany, we have increasingly rich and diverse trade with Germany, much bigger than we have with the Russians. And this will, to some extent, drive our relationship with Germany, which hopefully will be developing in a very constructive and constructive way that will be helpful in terms of also the dialogue between Warsaw and Berlin regarding the vision for the European Union and how European Union would be more inclusive in the future.
You're welcome to jump in, or...
Well, you've mentioned Germany. I served there twice. I started my career right after Czechoslovakia split in '93, and then 2005 I was ambassador in Germany. And you mentioned Angela Merkel. I'd like to mention Helmut Kohl before, to make it sort of difference, which is obvious for whatever reasons. But when speaking about Europe and her role, I'd like to say that while Helmut Kohl, in fact, will be remembered in history as the one with others, with Mitterrand and so on, who built the house, the European Union. Merkel, I dare say, with all the controversies and critics, I believe she prevented it from collapsing. Don't forget, what happened in the European Union over the last 10 years with Eurozone crisis and subsequent crisis. So I think she will be remembered as the one who helped it save. Number two, what will be decisive for European Union in the next 5 to 10 years, how we deal with what I call a legacy of a decade of crisis. It's very long list of unfinished items and businesses and issues in the European Union. We have Eurozone, but it's unfinished and not complete. It's just a little bit pregnant. It doesn't, we have it, but we don't have it. It doesn't function as it should. There is unfinished business. Migration crisis. If you look at demography, if you look at Africa, which is the closest continent to us, there are 7 or 6 to 8 people, 6 to 8 million people stand by and ready to move again. With the European Union almost fell apart on 1 million, which moved to European Union. Imagine if those people move, and it's them in Africa. You have Middle East and so on and so on. Then the huge issue, certainly externally, is how to preserve, and I've mentioned that, how to preserve this relationship between the United States and Europe. I'm calling on you, everybody in this room, and I keep on doing that in other cities. Help us, please, maintain this relationship. We are one. We will be better off. What my friend, colleague Hinek said, you're a European nation partly as well, respecting everything, diversity and so on. But the legacy and heritage is there, and it helped us ensure and provide security over the last 70 years. And the US leadership here is indispensable. Thank you.
Very short intervention. It was my generation who joined the European Union, and when we did it, the deal was clear-cut. The more European I will be, the more free I will be. And that's something what got a little bit eroded over the years. So what we want from EU is to invest back to that feeling and bring the fire back.
I want to thank our diplomats for coming and I think providing us some really deep understanding of issues in their countries and how they're dealing with them on the politics, the geopolitics, the economics, and energy. I found this really eye-opening and appreciate you all for coming. Thank you.